Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Sunday, July the 9th, 2023. Today is O.J. Simpson's birthday, and he is 76. Now, I assume you've heard of O.J. Simpson. As far as I am concerned, he is incredibly famous, if perhaps notorious. In 1994, his wife, or ex-wife, Nicole Brown, was murdered. And, he was a major star, firstly a football star, then a famous actor. And after his wife's murder, it wasn't just his wife who was murdered, it was a man who was with her, Ronald Goldman, who I think he was a waiter. And O.J. Simpson was accused of a crime, and just over a year after the murder was June 12th, 1994, and he was acquitted on October the 3rd, 1995. It was one of those Kennedy moments, anyone over 45, over 50 now, surely would be able to remember where they were when O.J. Simpson was acquitted. I don't really follow this kind of thing, but I certainly know where I was when I heard that O.J. Simpson was acquitted. And, I remember that the people around me were very excited by it. And I'm not even American. I wasn't even in America. I was in North London. So it was a very big deal. And because it's his birthday. He's a Cancerian, and I think that's important. But I will be looking at his horoscope a bit later. First, I want to look at the astrology for today, which is Sunday, July the 9th, 2023. So, the moon is in Aries. It's pretty solidly in Aries now. So that means it's a time when we can be decisive. We don't have to spend ages and ages trying to work out what's going on, trying to emote. Some of the emotion that's been buzzing around over the last few days has calmed down a little. So, nice assertive placement, moon in Aries. At the same time, Mercury is starting to make a trine to Neptune. So Mercury is in Cancer, a water sign, making a trine to Neptune in Pisces. Now, with Mercury, it is the planet of communication. One often associates Mercury with talking a lot, but Cancer is one of the mute signs. Its symbol is a crab. Crabs don't make much noise, so Mercury in Cancer is not known for making a huge amount of noise, and so when it's trine Neptune, there is a certain sensitivity there. And one can maybe associate Mercury trine Neptune with perhaps psychic abilities, or psychic abilities are going to be more finely tuned than usual. Neptune is the planet of spirituality, of psychism, and so we might be able to pick up on people's thoughts and feelings, in a gentle kind of way. And so that sort of softens some of the edge of the moon in Aries. But that's the main stuff going on. Oh, there's one other thing. You can see that Mars is at 29:30 Leo at noon in New York today, July the 9th, and Pluto is at 29:25 Capricorn. So in other words, Mars is making an 150-degree aspect to Pluto. And astrologers call this aspect a quincunx, Quincunx. And quincunxes tend not to be very fortunate. There's Mars in Leo, trying to be assertive, trying to get attention, trying to make a name for itself. Yet it's got to deal with Pluto in Capricorn. So some of us might feel that there's something holding us back. There's a sort of a issue that we're trying to deal with, and we just can't quite get free of it. It may be an internal issue. It may be something like an obsession with details, and we're so concerned about details that our ability to act freely is somehow curtailed. Or it may be other people. Pluto in Capricorn might be people more serious than us, saying, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, all that kind of stuff. So many of us, when we try to be assertive, and we are, I think, going to want to be assertive, especially as we've got Moon in Aries as well, we might find that there's something holding us back. Might be our own psychology, might be outside forces, and we have to work it through. There is a solution, so that's something we have to find out. Now, as far as my forecasts for the 12 signs are concerned, here we go. So these are the forecasts, my forecasts for today, which is Sunday, July the 9th, 2023. Aries, the moon is well established in your star sign, and you're ready to take on the world and win. Yet you may feel that authority figures and self-styled adults are cramping your style. The solution is neither rebelling nor compromising. It's about talent and personality. Taurus, you don't need to be out in the world making a big impression. Just do your own thing. And with Mercury aspecting Neptune, you can communicate in subtle, even supernatural ways. And it is possible to be friends with people at a distance. Gemini, a strange day for Geminis when you're surprisingly sensitive. This is because Mercury, your ruling planet, is making a gentle trine aspect to Neptune. You can feel what's going on around you, and you know the answers without having to ask questions. Cancer, I know it's a Sunday, but that doesn't mean that you should do nothing. From a career and business perspective, there are things going on, and if you assert yourself just a tiny bit, you can be part of the action. Leo, you're ready to go, but something is holding you back. It may be something in your head, a concern about details, which is exaggerated out of all proportion. Unless you're doing something safety critical, it is probably not necessary for everything to be in order. Virgo. Virgoans can sometimes rub people the wrong way, but right now you understand what's going on, and your interactions can be considerate and proper. And if you trust your feelings, relationships can move to the next level. Libra. Power struggles are part of the course, but there won't be any winners or losers. Yet, with the moon moving through Aries, your opposite sign, you have to consider the social dimension. Let others act, and then decide how to respond. Scorpio. Mars, your ruler, is approaching Regulus, the royal star. It's a time when you can attract important and influential people, yet you somehow don't feel comfortable with the situation. But communications shouldn't stress you out, especially as there are no rights and wrongs. Rights and wrongs in terms of perhaps the facts, and also in terms of behaviour. Right behaviour, wrong behaviour, is there really a difference? Sagittarius, you hear something random and disconnected, which sounds like nonsense. It's easy to dismiss it, but concealed within the randomness is a fundamental truth. Take it on board, but don't let it interfere with what should be a fun and exciting Sunday. Capricorn. For most Capricorns, a quiet Sunday, where you can assert your identity within your home environment. And overall, family and friends are on the same wavelength. But if there are troublemakers, your overall attitude can put them to flight. Aquarius, you've got a point to make, which perhaps you've been delaying. And now might be your chance. The reaction won't be as dramatic as you had expected. Matters are helped by your ability to anticipate the next move, or perhaps the next word. Pisces, Mercury in Cancer is starting to aspect Neptune in Pisces. This is a fortunate influence which puts you in tune with the cosmos, especially on a mental and intellectual level. Yet, financial issues can't be ignored, and you may have to tell people what you think. So, I'm now going to move to the I Ching. So, as always, I threw the coins in the air, asking the question, what is Sunday going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? And the first hexagram I got was 36, darkening of the light. You can see this sort of symbolically. Bottom three lines, it's like a sun. I don't know if you can make out a sun in there or a fire, but it's gone under. So it's not a very fortunate hexagram, but it does move, don't worry. It suggests that the powers of darkness are in their ascendancy, and there's not really a great deal we can do in the short term. And this first line moves, and when that first line moves, there's a warning about gossip, particularly if we do what is right. So if we're true to ourselves, even though the forces of darkness might be in the ascendancy, we might attract negative attention. We might be the subject of gossip. People might say bad things about us. But the I Ching is kind of advising that we have to be true. We do have to be true to ourselves. Even if that does mean that there is gossip, it's just the way it is. But it is very short term. Remember, I'm just asking what today is going to be like, and this is only the first movement. And in terms of how we deal with this darkness, we might be injured by it. Our pride might be injured. We might lose our concentration. The I Ching, I think, talks about an injury to the thigh, so that talks about a literal injury, but I don't think we're talking about a real physical injury here. It's an injury that we'll get over, especially as this hexagram moves. It moves to hexagram number 46. There you go, pushing upwards. So it's telling us that we can make progress. We focus on making small gains. We're not trying to do anything dramatic, but one step after another, and we make more and more progress. And we're probably out of the woods. So if we look at these two hexagrams overall, perhaps the day has a bad start, a day where we feel sort of overwhelmed by the powers of darkness, or whatever that might be. I don't know what that means if you're going to church this morning, but bear that in mind, I suppose, if you're going to church this morning. But maybe the sort of person that watches this video doesn't go to church anyway. So by the end of the day, things should be moving. You'll be able to heap up solid gains. Don't try to do anything dramatic, but by the day's end, things should be fine. So what I want to do now is look at the horoscope of O.J. Simpson. Now, when we're looking at O.J. Simpson's chart, we need to bear in mind the difference between criminal cases and civil cases. You know, if you are go to court, and you're accused of committing a murder, there is an extremely high standard of proof. If you are not proved beyond reasonable doubt, then you should be acquitted. So O.J. Simpson was acquitted of murdering Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman. But I believe Ronald Goldman's family sued O.J. Simpson afterwards, and the court did find him responsible in some way. I don't know the full details for his death. So that was Ronald Goldman's family, and they awarded a huge amount of damages. But it was a civil court, so there is a difference. In a civil court, the burden of proof is not as high. So as far as O.J. Simpson is concerned, Nicole Brown had complained about physical abuse from him. He had, I think he broke her arm at one stage, and in the end she left him. I think they got a divorce, but that wasn't good enough for O.J. Simpson. He was still obsessed with her. He wanted her back. So that's the background. So we might want to keep it simple and say, well, look, O.J. Simpson is a Cancerian. Cancerians, male and female, can be extremely possessive. So, if you get involved in a relationship with a Cancerian, you need to really think what you're doing, because it might not be very easy to get out of that relationship. And O.J. Simpson was, I think, showing classic negative Cancerian traits. Just he wanted her back, regardless of his behavior. And one might think, him being a Cancer, there was a certain amount of jealousy involved here, just simply, by virtue of him being a Cancerian, and the sort of potential for anger is also seen in this chart. He's got his moon in Pisces square Uranus in Gemini. And that moon in Pisces, it's actually quite a nasty moon in Pisces. Moon in Pisces can sort of go all over the place, and it's in the 8th house. And from a perspective of Indian astrology, it's Kamadruma yoga, which means it's separate from the rest of the chart, somewhat estranged from what else is going on, and that indicates him and society in general. That moon square Uranus is difficult, and we also see that Saturn, Saturn is semi-square his Uranus, and it's sesquiquadrate his moon, and it's square the Moon-Uranus midpoint. So if you've got Saturn on the Moon-Uranus square the Moon-Uranus midpoint, that can represent a huge build-up of tension. It doesn't have a good release, and so that Saturn can cause a lot of problems. Also note in this chart that there is no Earth. No planets in Taurus, no planets in Capricorn, no planets in Virgo. So O.J. Simpson might, in some respects, not be particularly grounded. Look how almost all his planets as well are above the horizon. He's only got Jupiter and Neptune below the horizon. So he's out there in the world, public attention. I think there was, just before his arrest, there was this car chase. I mean, it wasn't a super fast, I don't think it was a super fast car chase, but I think there was O.J. Simpson in his car being pursued by police, and it was all on the news cameras. What that is really getting a lot of attention. By the way, that Jupiter on the IC in Scorpio, I think that is that's a great Jupiter. It does ground things. May have contributed to his success. He's got Saturn in the 12th as well. I was just talking about Saturn in the 12th and how Saturn is, Saturn joys in the 12th, particularly as it is a daytime chart. Saturn is a masculine planet and it's in a masculine sign. And Saturn is it's a daytime planet in a daytime chart. So it is a strong Saturn, even though it's in Leo, the sign of its detriment. So those are some of the features of his chart. There's one other thing, the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now the Mars-Saturn midpoint is around 8 Cancer, 7 or 8 Cancer. You can see there's Mars, there's Saturn. It's going to be around here. So he has got Neptune on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Mars and Saturn can be about anger. They can be about death. They can be about destruction. And Neptune is square the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So that can suggest, being quite violent without really knowing what's going on. Neptune is about that confusion and a sort of one emotion runs into another emotion, and Neptune makes it all messy, and it just happens just like that. And we shouldn't forget the physical abuse that Nicole Brown had endured. So at the very least, Neptune on the Mars-Saturn would explain that. We then have to consider what was going on when Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman were murdered. Now, regardless of whether O.J. Simpson was responsible for the murder, it had a big impact on his life. Can't deny that. So what was actually going on? Any clues? So the first thing I'd want to look at is his solar return prior to the murder. Well, here's the murder itself. June the 12th, 1994. Apparently the best time available is around 10 p.m. on that evening. You can see that at the time of the murder, Mars was on the IC, so Mars was on an angle. So that's perhaps suggestive that something really bad had happened. But I wanted first to look at O.J. Simpson's solar return. So this is the moment when the sun returns to where it was when he was born, preceding the murders. So if we look at the solar return, so we have to go back to his previous birthday, because June the 12th is, a month before his I think, his 47th birthday. So we have to kind of go back to the previous. We have to go back to the previous year for 1993. So this is his solar return for 1993, July the 8th of the year. So is there anything interesting there? Well, there's nothing angular. That's true. We do notice Moon is opposition Mars. In fact, Moon is opposition Mars, and the North Node is square it. So we have a sort of grand cross involving the nodal axis and the Moon-Mars opposition. So there's a bit of valence suggested there. Moon-Mars can be valence connected with women. Mars is valence, Moon is a universal significator of women. We also have the Sun opposition Uranus. So yeah, there's a bit of a suggestion of valence there. I would not have said that in itself that was enough to say, oh well, something dreadful is going to happen in the next year. But perhaps we need to look at the solar return and put it next to O.J. Simpson's chart. And it's here that something rather interesting happens. So we're going to put O.J. Simpson's chart in the inner wheel and the solar return on the outer wheel. So there is O.J. Simpson's moon in the 25 degrees. I'll make this a bit bigger. 25 degrees 36 Pisces. There's a Uranus at 23:26 Gemini. So Moon square Uranus. That kind of makes sense. We've got it there. But then let's look at the angles on the solar return. The solar return had a midheaven of 25:26 Gemini. In other words, right on O.J. Simpson's natal Uranus. And the ascendant on the solar return was 25:56 Virgo, which means that the descendant was 25:56 Pisces. So in other words, the moon was exactly on the descendant of the solar return was hitting OJ's moon. So that really highlights his Moon-Uranus square. And sort of my sort of hypothesis when looking at OJ's chart and what was going on June the 12th, June the 12th, 1994, was it was really a Moon-Uranus thing. So we've already got the solar return indicating that there was Moon-Uranus sort of activity going on. I then want to look at his secondary progressions. Now remember, secondary progressions are when you take every day after you're born is equal to 1 year. So this would be so you count, say, 47 days after he was born, and you would say that says something about his 47th year. So we see at the time of his the time of this murder that progressed moon is at 24 Sagittarius, and his progressed Uranus is at 25 Gemini. So in other words, progressed moon was opposition progressed Uranus, and of course Uranus is a slow mover, so the moon is also going to be opposition his natal Uranus. So I think the secondary progressions are hinting that there's something going on with between Moon and Uranus, another Moon-Uranus event. Now we can also look at solar arc directions. So I'm going to I will say So here is his chart with the solar arc directed planets, and we can see that his there is his solar arc directed Uranus. So his solar arc directed Uranus is pretty much, well, not exactly there, but it's moving towards a conjunction with his Saturn. And his, by definition, we can see the same thing. The solar arc directed moon is at 10 Taurus, so it's square his Saturn. So if you take the midpoint between Moon and Uranus, it'll be exactly on the Saturn. So if you take his moon, his natal moon square Uranus, you do a solar arc direction, count 47 degrees, it hits his Saturn. So I think that is that's really very telling. And his solar arc, there's his solar arc directed Saturn, which is 23 Virgo, is square his Uranus. So it's just Saturn Uranus all over the place. And whatever happened, and whoever was responsible, in a criminal court, he was found not guilty. But in terms of how the whole thing occurred to him in 1994, it was all about Saturn. It was all about Saturn Uranus, and the way I kind of think about this Saturn Uranus, Moon Uranus, the Moon Uranus, this moon. How do we interpret the moon? The moon is kind of perhaps the mother. I mean, I know this is a bit of a cliche, but the mother is, if you're married to someone, she's gonna have some kind of mother connotations. But what about the anger? And I'm thinking that one of the psychologists that I remember I had to read about when I was doing my degree in psychology decades ago, when I was developmental psychology, was Melanie Klein. And Melanie Klein had this concept of the good breast and the bad breast. And so that a child sees, a very small baby sees the good breast is the breast that gives milk, and the bad breast is the mother that takes away the breast. And so there's a confusion there. And normally the child works it out. But, this devastating realization that it's the same person. The person who gives the breast and takes it away is the same person. And I think that there's a theory in Kleinian psychology that for some people they don't get over this, and so when the woman withdraws, or maybe wants to divorce him, there can be a spiral back to some kind of infantile way of being. And part of a thing that Klein, I think, suggested is that when the child is really, really small and can potentially have murderous feelings towards the mother when that breast is taken away. I mean, I think that's an important part of psychotherapy, is that very, very young children can have terrible feelings. And I suppose if an adult is in the same, has not quite got over that problem, they can kind of spiral into these chthonic, murderous feelings. And so I'm thinking that it's something like that is going on with that Moon Uranus, and we already know that he assaulted Nicole Brown and broke her arm. So anyway, those are some thoughts on O.J. Simpson. I did want to talk about one other chart before I leave, and that is the chart of Henry VIII. It was Henry VIII's birthday was 2 days ago. Henry VIII of England. Now, if you know your Tudor history, he had 6 wives. And I think it goes, how does it go? First wife, it goes divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So here is someone, Henry VIII. He had 2 of his 6 wives executed. So, you know, okay, if you married Henry VIII, statistically, you'd only have a third chance of getting, 33% chance of getting executed. But you'll see that he has got Moon in Aries in the 8th house. So he's got Moon in the 8th house, like O.J. Simpson. He's a Cancerian. So clearly, if he suspected one of his wives of being unfaithful to him or whatever, you know, in a Tudor world, I mean, that is really, really serious. No, but the reason I wanted to show you Henry VIII's chart is because of something really interesting. You know, as you know, if you've listened to my videos, I go on and on and on about midpoints. You know, I do use midpoints a lot in my work, and I'm really into the Mars-Saturn midpoint. That's just me. I'm just morbid. So here is someone who is associated with killing his wives, although he did only kill 2 of his wives. You know, some people think he killed all 6. He didn't. So what might you expect in his chart for someone who is associated with killing women? You know, remember Mars-Saturn? Yeah, you got it. It's let me show you his midpoints. Here's Henry VIII's midpoints. I'll make this as big as I can. And this is his Venus midpoint tree. There is his Venus midpoint tree. And you will see that he has Venus opposition his Mars-Saturn midpoint. And you can see this. You can see this if you look at his chart. Let's make it smaller again. There's his Venus. There's Mars. There's Saturn. And so you can pretty much see that Venus is opposition his Mars-Saturn midpoint. Venus, Mars, Saturn. I'll just tell you what Vita says about Venus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, just to give you an idea. This is Alfred Vita's rules for planetary pictures, which I use a lot. So he says Venus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint would be insensibility, ingratitude for kind action, actions of separation by female persons, death of female persons. So there you get the idea. You know, he is associated with executing his wives. Although three of his, because one died, so half his wives, 3 of the 6 died one way or another. So that's all I'm going to say on the subject of Cancerians and O.J. Simpson and Henry VIII. And I hope you found that interesting, and I will talk to you tomorrow.